Please help me welcome Kavis Reed.
Thank you very much, Kelly, and good morning to all of you. I'm hoping you're having a safe and wonderful Wednesday. Welcome to the Saskatchewan Construction Safety Association Leadership Conference. It is truly my pleasure to serve as your moderator this morning as we discuss a very important topic, leadership in construction. Leadership is all about influence. It is about getting people to see the value of doing things the right way to achieve objectives for all stakeholders' benefit. In construction, leadership is about inspiring and influencing a culture that makes safety an uncompromised priority. I'm pleased and honored to be joined by two gentlemen that have exemplified over decades the art and science of leadership in the construction industry, Mr. Wayne Morksy and Brian Barber. Gentlemen, welcome to both of you this morning. Thank you for sharing time with us. And before we get into questions from the audience, I would like to ask both of you, many people become interested in leadership, especially in construction or safety, because of a personal story. Do any of you have a personal story that you would like to tell the attendees?
I'll start, Kavis, and thanks for that introduction. I have a sad personal story relating to safety. In October 2005, my 15-year-old nephew died in a forklift accident at our family-owned lumberyard and hardware store at Regina Beach, and it's left an indelible imprint on my attitude towards safety, and certainly left a big hole our family continues to try to fill. And this is just not the type of thing I'd want anyone to experience, and so that's crystallized my view and the important safety, not just on the job site, but everywhere. So that's my personal story, Kavis.
Kavis, nice to see you again, especially when our paths used to cross in the football world, and nice to see my colleague, Brian. I'm gonna let Brian go first on a lot of things, because when you compare the two companies between us and him, he's kind of like the NHL and we're the Highway Hockey League here in Saskatchewan. So
I wouldn't go that far away.
And I'd also say, Kavis, it just wonders why you have such a good relationship with Colin. You're such a nicer guy, couldn't hear it to him.
But he's better looking.
My story goes back. My parents are immigrants to the country from the Ukraine, and started in farming, and we got into construction. So we lived in the camps right from a very early age, and safety was zero. There was no thoughts about it. It would just go, and you had no option at that time. But as I became more and more responsible for people that were working under me, and I got to know their families, I got to know their kids, what they did in their school life and stuff like that. And I started to think about the fact, like, how would I go to someone's house to tell them that I was responsible for someone's accident that day? And that's where I really changed my perspective on safety, that it's not just something that happens at the job, but it's a culture. And it's something that you think about 24 hours a day. Like, you'll wear a steel toe boots all day at work, but you'll go home and cut the grass in a pair of flip-flops. So for me, it became that transition of having to be responsible for someone and the outcome of their lives.
Thank you very much. And I must say that I hang with Colin because he's a far better looking version of myself. Gentlemen, this thing called leadership has been widely discussed, and there are so many different definitions and so many different understanding of leadership. Would you mind, Brian, telling the audience what you perceive leadership in the construction industry to be?
Sure, Kavis. I think leadership has changed significantly since I started my career in construction. The days of the autocratic disciplinarian who were so prevalent in the early days has been replaced by the leader of today, who possesses what academics and scholars refer to as emotional intelligence, or high degree of emotional intelligence. And really, I think what that means to me and what I see today is that they're self-aware, they self-manage, they strive to continuously improve. And I think they're very relationship oriented. In simple terms, and to piggyback a little bit on what Wayne said, I think they understand and relate well to people. And I think that's an important trait in today's society, more important than ever. And that's my take on leadership today and where it's come from in my career anyway.
Outstanding. Mr. Morksy?
Yeah, I think engagement and, going through what we have in the last 14 months during this isolation period where you can't engage like you used to. But being able to get out there and see the people and meet them, and I know we all have busy lives and we love to use our devices, but to lead by example and to get out there and to talk to the people and find out exactly how they're doing and to see what they're doing is really important as a leader.
Yeah, and you mentioned the word engagement, hands-on, being aware. A part of leadership, a very important part of leadership is being aware of what's going on around you so that you can have a pulse and be able to make the adjustments and correction where necessary so that all stakeholders are benefiting from the culture that you created. And let's talk about this thing, culture. The culture, as you mentioned, Brian, has shifted and changed. There is a tremendous premium on safety on sites now. It's not about let's bang this out as fast as possible. Let's make certain we do it right so that everyone gets home safely. How have you seen the culture continue to shift in that direction of zero tolerance when it comes to safety on the site?
Yeah, I think in a couple of ways, mostly, Kavis, younger people are entering the field with more formal education in safety leadership and management, and they have a more academic perspective on what it's about. And I think the construction site as we know it today is evolving from just hard hats to more understanding engineered design and reading drawings. And I think that safety attitude that begins in the schools and in the engineering schools is more pervasive. And I think we're just more aware generally, because it's held into our guys at every opportunity. To Wayne's point, we don't want people going home with an injury or worse, with a fatality on one of our sites. So it's just so critical that we continue to strive to make the workplace as safe as possible at every opportunity.
Yeah, you bring up a good point, Wayne. I would like to ask you to address. All workers are coming in well educated. We have done a great job of putting infrastructure and educational structure in place to inform all workers. People tend to believe that titles create leadership. Now we have very well educated people on the work site that are able to make decisions and discern right or wrong, and sometimes challenge those with the title that are asking them to do things that may not be so safe. Have you witnessed that, Wayne? And how have you seen the work site change from a leadership perspective, not necessarily by the titles, but by the education of the whole?
Yeah, I think the big change is the safety used to be a top-down thing where we forced it down the pipe because we had to, our buyers of our construction service used to make us do that. Now it's more of a peer thing where they work together, because you can't be there for everything. But to your point, Kavis, is the education that's available for them out there right now is phenomenal, and they want it, they demand it. They're like sponges, which is good. If you think about it, and sometimes when you look at a project, 1/3 of your cost is almost related to the safety side of things. But if you were to say how much it's going to cost you if you don't do it, it's probably over half. And so these young people today, the education they have, not only what they see on the job site, but just in their personal lives. You think about how many times Brian Barber rode in the back window of a car with his parents driving down the road. All those little things that we've learned as we go through society now comes from being a day-to-day thing to part of your work life.
Yeah, outstanding. And it's tremendously important that we do emphasize and understand that it is peer to peer. It is title sometimes means that you're a manager of the situation, not necessarily a leader in the situation. I will remind our audience, if you have a question, please enter it in the chat room. We've already gotten a few questions and I will start to read them off. Brian, Wayne, first question from the audience is, how can we advance the field of construction safety and management attitudes towards construction safety?
I've got a thought on that, and it goes further than just construction safety. I think workplace safety in general should start at the high school level. The sooner we get that kind of safety culture embedded in in young people entering the workforce, the better it is. And I think we need to hit it early and educate people about generally work safety, and not just construction. Wayne talks about vehicle safety and all that stuff. The sooner we start, the sooner we get it embedded in young people, and the sooner it will continue throughout their career. So I think that's an important first step, is to get it in the curriculum as early as possible.
Wayne, same question to you.
Yeah, no question. Yeah, Brian's exactly early, but the second part of that for me is peer to peer. How can you get them to work together where if they look at each other and say, look, you don't look like you're ready for something today, and I'm going to be loading you, or you're going to be loading me with gravel. Are you okay? Everything okay at home and stuff like that, where they can be responsible for each other, knowing very well in the end it's to their best interest to do that. So between early education and peer to peer, I think that's a great success story.
Teamwork, looking out for each other is critically important in every aspect of safety. This is the next question. It has one where you guys have to put your futuristic lens on. Question asks, what do you think will happen in construction safety in the next 5 to 10 years, understanding technology like drones, exoskeletons, and 3D printing? Where do you think safety in the construction industry is going in the next 5 to 10 years? Mr. Barber?
Yeah, I'm not sure my crystal ball is any better than anybody else's. I think we'll see a couple of significant changes. I think Europe and Australia are already seeing significant increases in mental health claim costs, and it's certainly in the news everywhere, mental health and addictions. And I think that's going to become as critical as the physical side of health. And I think that'll be more and more prevalent and something we need to be aware of. The other trend I think is going to continue, and I don't think as an industry we've done a particularly good job about attracting young people into the trades and construction, and interest has been waning for years. We need to make sure our young people understand the benefits of a career in construction and make it more appealing than it's been, because I think human capital will become in shorter and shorter supply as we respond to the changing marketplace. And I touched on earlier the kids that are joining our construction industry are better educated and better informed, certainly technically. And I think that'll be a trend that we'll see in the future as these kids get more and more educated. And a couple minor ones, I think you're going to see more modular, more factory construction. We're going to take some of the productivity out of the field and put it into the shop floor and have it pre-built and sent to the site. Anything to increase productivity. So that's a few of the things that I see, Cavis, changing in our business.
I want to pick up on something, Wayne. I'm going to ask you. You talked about mental health, and you also alluded to the fact that it is also about the health, the emotions, etc. Have there already been, or is there a need to start to put mechanisms in place to communicate how people are feeling on the work site, to not only evaluate their physical performance and processes, but also to get an understanding of how a person is feeling when they're on the site? Is that going to become something that is important, in your opinion, Wayne, in terms of mental and emotional health on the work site?
Yeah, that's very important, and it's very relevant to something we do at one of our project sites is we have a retina scanner. And so it's recording what's happening from day to day. And it's very easy to see whether a person has not slept the night before. And that could be caused by many things. It could be caused by a disagreement within their household, because of stress. It could be something that's an addiction problem. But monitoring those levels is a mental health thing. And the person beside you can say, look, hey, like I said earlier, are you okay? Did you sleep well last night? Do you want to maybe trade positions today? Do you want to take a break for an hour or something? But dealing with it on a one-to-one basis. But we all know the stigma that's attached to mental health, and people don't want to talk about it right now. So the more we can get it out there, we're doing a good job in society, but we're not doing it as good as we should be in the construction industry, because typically it's an industry of male-dominated people that don't want to show any pain or suffering. But I think we really need to push that hard going forward. I just wanted to add something to what Brian said earlier about the future of it. I'm in the heavy civil industry where with a lot of heavy equipment, we're talking about autonomous equipment right now. They're already using it in mine sites and stuff, which is not great for the labor force, but it's one of the things they're looking at. But wearable safety devices are something that's going to be quite a thing in the future. And I'm not talking about having different pairs of gloves for cutting, but a vest that you wear that has a monitor on it that if you come within a certain range of a piece of equipment, it goes off and things like that. So that kind of technology will be very valuable to the industry that I've been in all my life.
I think you're onto something. Not only are you good looking, but you're inventive as well. I want to go quickly before we move on to the next question from the audience, because you gentlemen are bringing up some very good points that I want to make certain we don't miss for the audience. You talk about the gender difference in the construction industry. Are there mechanisms in place to help with the recruitment? There is predicted or projected to be a human capital deficit in terms of the number of people entering into the industry versus the demand that is upcoming. Has there been a recruitment plan in place to help to mitigate or offset this projection? Mr. Barber?
Yeah, there's lots of work left to do on that front, Cavis, but I think that trend is changing. We're seeing more and more diversity on our job sites, and particularly women. We're trying to make the workplace generally more compatible for either sex, and it's coming. It's slow to turn because, as Wayne said, it's construction has typically been male dominated and not a particularly comfortable place for females, but that's changing. And I go on our job sites and there's more and more women. It's coming, and we're doing all we can as an industry and an organization to make it more appealing, more appealing generally to kids entering the workforce. So it's coming.
Yeah, and to Brian's point, the construction industry, Cavis, back about 10 years ago, had its first female chairperson of the Canadian Construction Association, Shirley Westindy, who is definitely a leader in the industry. And since then, we've had two others that have come in that. And as the skill set changes from physical to mental, that's a big part. So in the heavy construction industry, the type of equipment that we're running right now, the cabs on them are really safe and they're very easy to work in. And it's more of a mental skill that's needed, or hand-eye coordination, and you've removed some of the physical aspect of it. There's no question it's opened up a lot. And I think there's a whole bunch of other fields that we can look at. And Cavis, you come from the football world, and when I was part of the CFL, a lot of the players that are retiring, this is nothing against anybody with university degrees, because I paid for a couple of them in my family, just didn't have one myself, but there's a lot more out there. And some of those players, whether they come out of the football, whether they come out of hockey, or even in the military, the skilled trades that are needed in the construction industry today are a real viable place for them to look at. And we've got to do a good job of promoting that at a young level to all genders and all diversity, because there is a great opportunity and people can do very well in the construction industry. Just got to get to them early.
Absolutely. I want to remind the audience, if you have a question, please put it in the chat. We'll make certain to get to as many of them as we possibly can. Let's move on to another question. What change to safety measures made to the industry because of COVID-19 will stick around once the pandemic's done? Mr. Barber, what changes have already been instituted because of COVID that you see will have a mainstay?
I got a couple of thoughts in that regard, Cavis. Certainly the hand washing stations, the cleaning, disinfecting, that kind of thing. Europe already has a much higher standard of care for those things than we do. I think that'll continue as people are more and more aware of the need for better hygiene on the job sites. The other thing I think you'll see more of this virtual construction, because to avoid close contact, more employees will shift to electronic format or documents, online orientations, and just make the completion of those types of things more convenient and efficient to everyone. So I think those are two that will stick around for sure, is the hygiene and electronification of documents and to avoid the close contact and hopefully become more efficient.
Excellent. Always about efficiency. Wayne? Any comments on what you think
Yeah,
will stick around?
Brian's pretty well answered the ones I've talked about, and it's just gonna be a way of doing business differently. One of the concerns I have going forward is how do you address an employee calling you in the morning and say they've got a sniffle and a sore throat based on where we are today? Like the testing is gonna have to be really well planned out, because now it's a whole different. Before, someone would call in and say they had a sore throat, you'd say, suck it up and come to work, it's okay. But you can't do that anymore. So we're gonna have to be very diligent on how we respect when someone does tell you that there's something wrong. And I guess that goes back to the mental health issue also.
Outstanding.
And to that point, Wayne, our industry already suffers with productivity problems. Things are taking longer and we're less efficient than, we haven't made the productivity gains that other industries have had. And that's a concern, right? It's a big concern. They're tightening up already. And when you're not as productive as you used to be, or not as productive as you should be, it just makes it more challenging.
Outstanding points. Next question. What do you think is the most interesting trend in construction management? The most interesting trend in construction management. Wayne, I'm going to go to you first on this one.
Well, Kavis, does this have to be a trend that's good or bad? Because I think one of the trends I'm not comfortable with is the lack of communication. I grew up in the communication world where you met and stuff, and we'll probably talk about it towards the end about being involved in construction associations, and you heard our rap sheets between the two of us. And that was a big part of the industry. And I think that trend is going away, where people are not getting engaged with their industry. My biggest education came from being involved in all the construction associations that I was from a very young age. And that trend is concerning. Who's going to do that work going forward? Because the sharing of knowledge between us as competitors, doesn't matter if you are a large company, a corporation across Canada, or a small SMME, you respected each other because you're in the industry and you taught each other and you learned from each other's mistakes and your wins. And I think that trend is going away, and that's a worrisome one for me.
Mr. Barber?
I've got a couple. One that concerns me is the increasing litigious nature of our construction contracts, the risk transfer, and some of that's come from your homeland, Kavis. I think the litigious nature of the U.S. contracting business is creeping north, and that concerns me. It makes it tougher to do business. I think it costs taxpayers money. Anytime you both have to take your lawyers to a construction meeting, it concerns me, and it's certainly not like it was when Wayne and I started in the business. So that's a concern. The other one that I'm seeing, which is more an observation than a concern, is we're seeing more subcontracting, more subcontracting. So general contractors, when I started, did everything from laying carpet to putting on baseboards, et cetera, et cetera. Now all of that stuff is subcontracted, and a lot of times subcontracted. And we struggle with getting those subs to comply with the same safety requirements as the parent company, because they think they're not working for us, they're working for the subcontractor. So that's one that I can see continuing, and that we struggle with that to maintain the safety standards on the site. And when you don't have a direct contractual relationship with the people doing the work.
Yeah, gentlemen, I have to say that you guys are keen observers and very much aware of the industry. You were bringing up so many good points. There's one, Wayne, that you brought up briefly that I would like for us to expound on: mentorship and sharing of information, best practices. There is a competitive nature in every business, every arena, but it is critically important, especially in the leadership and safety aspect of construction, that we share information and best practices so that the industry as a whole can benefit. Let's talk about this key word in leadership: mentorship. How have you guys seen it in your life and experience, mentorship at its best and working? Mr. Barber, any examples of how mentorship in terms of safety leadership and construction leadership from your experiences?
Yeah. Like the people of my vintage, I was fortunate to have several mentors in my life. I think it's really important to find somebody that you can learn from and latch onto them at an early stage of your life, and just be a sponge and take in everything that person has to offer. how they act, how they manage, how they lead life in a professional manner. And I think it's so important. And I think it speaks to Wayne's point of the communication piece. I think there's less and less opportunity for that, and maybe compounded by the COVID piece. I got several kids, and I advise all of them to learn every opportunity from the great people they have surrounding them, and latch on and be a sponge. And I don't think that advice ever grows old. Really important.
Wayne.
Yeah, there's the opportunity for mentorship probably is better than it ever has, because organizations have set it up where there is people that you can contact to be mentors. I know, years ago is you tried to find that person, and hopefully you did. For myself, on the backside of the career, it's like bragging in a way almost, which is good. You want to share what you learned and what you accomplished, what you did, some good, some bad. And when someone wants to be mentored, I jump on it right away because I think it's a great thing. I've always believed if you give bread, it'll come back buttered. And when you work with these young people like that, the stuff that they learn, you also learn from them too. And so go into it with an open mind and try to figure out the best way for everybody to do it. But, even organizations like the construction associations, they have mentor programs set up. In local business communities have mentor programs set up. So the opportunity is a lot greater nowadays that's facilitated, but there still are the people out there that are just there. And the example is a panel like this. These are great ways of doing it.
And I have to go back to one thing you said, Mr. Barber. Those darn Americans and all these legal suits, they're close the border, keep them away from our great country in terms of these lawsuits. I want to take a question. We have a question here. I want to ask, what would you think would be the number one way a construction owner can make a difference to the safety of workers? How can the ownership groups do things to make it more safe for workers? What's the number one way you think? Wayne, I'll give it to you first.
Well, I think you got to lead by example to start with. If you want a healthy lifestyle for your employees, you got to have that kind of example around you. So I think leading by example is a good way. Never question what someone suggests or ideas they do, because you want to learn from them also. For me, as a smaller organization, leadership starts at home, and it starts with the safety at home also. So getting to know their lives, getting to know their families. And I think I said this earlier, where at the end of the day, they go home and the spouse knows that the person they worked with that day is also on the same page as that they are. Makes it a lot easier to go to work. We do a lot of family events with our employees where spouses can meet spouses, and it's that culture just kind of leaves and goes home with you at the end of the day about how safe it is to work and how good it is. So it starts at the top, and I think you really have to stay connected, and we've used connectivity quite a bit today.
Mr. Barber.
Yeah, I would echo the same what Wayne says. You have to walk the talk. You need to encourage, mentor, reinforce the importance of safety at every opportunity, and then lead by example, as Wayne said. I mean, it's not rocket science. You just continually drill it in, right? How important it is. Make sure you do it yourself.
Yeah. This next question starts to really talk about and reflect where we are today. You mentioned earlier, I think it was you, Wayne, that the technology that we've implemented via Zoom to better implement training. Now there's no excuse really to be able to put training mechanisms and tool in front of people and give us the attitude that we're always practicing safety. So this next question reflect that. What are the best resources you use for learning about leadership and safety? Both leadership and safety, best resources. Brian?
Yeah, I think there's a few obvious ones. Professional journals, articles. There's so much written about a topic. There's no excuse for not being able to access that kind of stuff. And then peers, which Wayne's brought up before, hanging around with people that share the same values in in your industry organizations, being an active part of the Construction Safety Association, mentors, all of those things. Surround yourself with people that share those safety values, and it'll rub off on your people. So you need to be active in your industry, no question about it.
Wayne?
SCSA and call them cooler. There's the answer right there.
Yeah.
You know, years ago, we never had safety was, there might have been somebody within the organization of a construction association that was their file. Now you've got an association by itself, and it's not just in this one, but there's many of them. That's the first start right there. They've got all the resources there for you, and they're just willing to help you out along the way. You listen to Colin on the radio when he does his karaoke stuff in the mornings driving to work, and you can't help but think of safety after that, because that's the culture that they're trying to. It's kind of hard on the ears, Camus. You're lucky to go pick up the station sometimes here, but it definitely is it's out there all the time. And so your association is one. The other thing is technology. You know, there's all kinds of apps and everything out there where it's in your face, so you know right away if a person has done let's use an example of a walk around on their vehicle, because the technology before was a piece of paper. You had to walk out to the shop to look at it. Now it's instantaneous. And then there's the big brother side of it too, with you know, the cameras and things like that. So you can oversee these kind of things. And I don't mind having someone watch me on a camera if it's going to prevent an injury.
Yeah. You know, gentlemen, earlier in the conversation, you mentioned, and I believe it was you, Brian, that safety should be at the high schools as well. I'm going to ask a question. There is no industry, in particular construction industry, obviously we're talking about it today, is widely affected by it, but there's no industry that is immune to safety. Should we be teaching safety etiquette, safety leadership in the high schools? Is this something that we should extend into the schools? Brian, do you believe that this should start with the education that they receive on a daily basis?
Absolutely. And Wayne's point earlier, it's not just workplace safety, it's safety generally. It's not cutting the grass in your flip-flops. I mean, and yes, it should be at the school curriculum level. No question in my mind. So the simple answer is yes, Davis.
Wayne?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a culture. You have to teach them at that point in time. This is not something that you're going to use in your future career only. It's going to be something you're going to use in your day-to-day life. So if you can get that embedded into them, the same kind of thing, it starts really early with them.
Yeah, culture, behavior, all those things are critically important in repetitively doing something and making a part of your life. I'm going to touch on something, the American in me, Brian is going to touch on this, and it has to do with culture. And this thing where titles sometimes can preempt the cultural norm, which is safety in this particular case. Whistleblowing. Individuals that are not necessarily in a position of title, they see something going wrong, they see something not right on a site, they don't feel secure in coming out. Have you seen this happen, and what kind of mechanisms of protection should an individual be afforded for doing essentially the right thing? Brian?
Yeah, it be encouraged, particularly when it comes to safety. As much as it's often difficult and nobody wants to quote unquote squeal on somebody, when it comes to safety, there should be zero tolerance. It needs to be brought up. You need to have a culture that encourages it. It's in everybody's best interest to make sure everybody's safe. And so I think it's a must. And yeah, the culture needs to reward that kind of behavior. It's in everybody's best interest.
Wayne, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think when you look at the statistics of accidents that happen in construction, they don't put your title beside your name. It's irrelevant to who you are. Safety is not fussy at who it takes. And I think the fact that you know, if you start at the top and you lead by example and all the way down like that, it should work well. But you know, there's no question that there has to be some kind of a platform where someone can share if they're scared to do it directly. You have to give them that opportunity to do that.
Yeah. So again, I want to remind the audience that if you have a question, put it in the chat. Charlotte has put a question in, and I want to make certain I do justice. The question is, what if there's a disconnect between owners and safety personnel? Even though you're hired to on a contract, the description is required and the expectations expressed. What do you do when it seems they only want you to do it when it's convenient for them and becomes a point of contention between the owners and the safety personnel? So I think what Charlotte is saying here is ownership is saying cut corners, the safety personnel is saying not so fast. How do you manage that situation? Wayne?
That's a tough situation. I guess it could be other things too, not just safety. It could be the maintenance of your equipment if there's no coordination between the top and someone in the position that has to be responsible. I'd actually bring Colin into this question. If that was the case, why can't someone go to the Construction Association and ask them to help? Because if you can't find the help internally, like if you've exhausted all your sources and you can't seem to get the answers you need, is there not another agency that you could go to, such as the Construction Association, and say, look, this is what's happening. How would you deal with it? And would you intervene?
Yeah, and like we do in the CFL, we're going to go to Toronto for rules interpretation. So, Colin, in our control center, we want an answer from you. Colin, you're muted. Sorry. You're muted. Sorry.
Sorry about that, gentlemen. No, it's a great question, and this happens on a regular basis to our advisors, and where someone describes a particular situation like that, and while we're not in the role of the compliance officer, we don't have a legal role like that. What we do is we provide advice and guidance to companies as well, and so often when someone hears the same message from another credible source, they tend to respond differently. It's not unlike for those of us that have children and have seen this happen in our home. You try to give some what you think is great advice to impart some good advice to your children. They really don't want to necessarily respond to that in the way that you would expect. The next person down the road that they admire and respect says exactly the same thing, and suddenly things start to tune in. And that's not always the case, but it is very helpful. And there are times that our advisors have kind of stepped in to do that. That's not their primary role, of course. And like I said, in terms of in terms of legal responsibility or having legal authority to say shut a site down or anything like that, that's certainly embedded within the groups like labor relation, workplace safety. But having that outside advice can often get people to take a second thought, say, maybe I do need to take another look at that. Another area that has been an area that we invested in, and Wayne, you talked about mobile apps, is our mobile app. We've got the OHS guide to legislation. It's got 30 or 40, maybe it's almost 50 topic areas that are frequent issues on work sites. It points directly to legislation, but it also puts in very plain language for people what they should and should not do on a work site. It runs parallel to the training and education that we provide. Every worker could have it on their phone. They don't have to try to carry a 2-inch thick OHS manual in the back of their truck that just gets lunch piled on top of it and you never see it again. It's something in a mobile format that if there is I'm going to say it, I'll use, for lack of a better word, a dispute or a disagreement as to an approach, you've got a quick reference that a person could say, hey, listen, I'm not comfortable with this. And by the way, I can do a search word within the app and it tells us what we should and how we should approach a particular situation. So, those are a couple pieces of advice that I would throw in for the audience today in terms of ways to manage through it. And, Wayne, to your earlier point about communication and sometimes the challenges in having, we've got these great communication tools. We got text, we got WhatsApp, we got We've got all these instant messaging things and Instagram, but yet the heart of communication often is still missing. And understanding how to communicate with one another in a way that both can see benefit in in taking a particular approach. It's a I don't want to say it's a lost art, but it's an art that is getting harder to find. And I think investing the time in those communications will pay all sorts of dividends.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Colin, for giving us that very good insight. Brian, anything you would like to add to this very important question?
I think the key is simply to be proactive. It needs to be addressed as quickly as possible. Don't sweep it under the rug. And that, to further Colin's point, that means getting together and talking about it and getting the problem addressed as early as possible.
An important part of leadership, I remember in one of my courses, and it doesn't have to be an advanced level course, is difficult conversation. People sometimes tend to shy away from difficult conversation. In this particular case, the stakes are way too high to be afraid of the consequences of a difficult conversation. We have to have lives literally are at stake here. And it is our responsibility and our duty to make certain that we challenge even authority when we feel that safety is being compromised. And we have to prepare ourselves with facts and information and go in there with not emotions, but with facts being presented. The capital lost in human life, it far exceeds the bottom line of a company, far exceeds that. And we have to be able to and willing to have these conversations. I want to make a point to the audience that you can direct message me your questions. If you don't want everyone to see your questions, just don't use any swear words at me and we'll be fine. But you can direct message me the questions if you're more comfortable that way. We are employing the Vegas rule. What's said in Vegas stays in Vegas. And we'll make certain that no one is suffering any consequences from it. Next question. For smaller companies, sometimes the cost of doing things, safety become a hindrance rather in terms of time, equipment, and training. How do safety leaders within smaller companies strike that balance with management to do things that are safe as possible while keeping cost as low and practical? Very good question coming from David. Wayne, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I would reverse it and say, how can you afford it? I'd say, how can you not afford it? The cost of safety is, it has to be there. Like if you were to go through what happens, if you're on a job site and something happens, and the days that you could be shut down while they do an investigation far exceed the cost of something that you might have done simply before that. And I know that there's the small SMEs out there are trying to find that balance between profit and cost and everything else. But once you get it into the culture, it becomes natural and the flow seems to be a lot easier to work with. So I just would reverse it. Instead of saying we can't afford it, I'd sooner say we have to afford it. Brian?
Yeah, I think the other point that needs to be made is there's lots of resources at your disposal. The SC, just dial Colin. He's there to help at very low cost. I mean, that's what the industry's for, right? There's lots of help out there. The other concern I think I have generally as an industry is that the trend to increase documentation, which doesn't necessarily make you safer on the job site, it's there to cover your ass. And I think we need, as an industry, we need to be aware of that, make sure we're focusing our efforts on things that actually make the job site safer and not just filling out paperwork, because it's often the burden that weighs down some of these smaller organizations is the documentation and paperwork, which is really there to, like I say, cover your ass and not necessarily make you safer. So yeah, so the advice is to Colin's industry, turn to Colin for help, and focus on what makes the job site safer.
Yeah, and I have to say, Wayne, Brian, Do you think we're not omniscient, although I would say you and Wayne and Brian are pretty darn close, but we're not omniscient. Do you think that the safety aspect of budgeting needs to be a priority? In this particular case, it seems like, yeah, you have limited resources, but are you prioritizing safety in your budgeting process? Do you think that companies need to start to implement more of a strategy in their budget and their forecasting around safety? Brian?
No question in my mind. As Wayne eloquently said, how can you not? It's a cornerstone of our industry, of our business. Yes, there's a cost, but it saves lives. You have to have it. It trumps everything in my mind. So you need it. And yes, carry a budget for it and focus on it. And those that don't will be passed by those that do. So I don't have a whole lot of empathy for organizations say it's too expensive to enforce safety or to promote safety. I just think that's incorrect. I feel pretty strongly about it.
Wayne, your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't think we even use it as a budget item anymore. It's just a way, it's just there. And everything is in place right now, unless it's something specific to a project where you might have to add something into it. But it's just a way of life for us now. There's no question about it. It's, the costs are already embedded into what we do on a day-to-day. And we don't even use it as a separate item. And I think sometimes that's important too, that helps you get to that culture. But if you specify it and take it out and make it a single item, then you're not putting as much emphasis on it.
It's a given. It's a given.
Kavis, if I could just add something to and what both Wayne and Brian have said here, and it connects something that they opened up with in terms of education. We're seeing and in Saskatchewan, we're seeing a higher degree of safety being incorporated at the post-secondary level, and whether someone's doing a diploma program through a business program through the U of R, or if they're taking a program through Sask Polytechnic, their construction management program now has a full incorporation of safety as part of one of the requirements to even graduate from their program now. And that's a pretty recent addition. It's been in the last year or so, and we've had a chance to work with Sask Poly to get content built in. But the point is that they're beginning to integrate that into the thinking on all of their business management acumen checklists, if you want to call it that, on how they look at a problem, how engineers, as they're doing their planning, how do they incorporate safety in the early planning, as opposed to just, well, we'll do the design and we'll pass it off to the company to figure out how they're going to put this thing together safely. At the design stage, and so these are educational and cultural elements being brought in that I think over time, if we stay persistent with that effort, will pay the kind of dividends that both Wayne and Brian are saying, Kavis.
Yeah, excellent points. Excellent points. Brian, we want I remember the audience wants to go back to something you talked about earlier, and it struck me as well. You talked about the safety reporting from the sub level to the sub level. This question says, do you have any suggestions for how we can ensure safety for all when we have multi-level subcontracting?
Yeah, good question. And it's pretty clear. If you're on our job site, we don't care if you're a sub, you will comply with the safety rules on the site. And just because you don't have a direct contractual relationship with us, it doesn't matter. The rules apply to everyone. So get with the program or get off the site and we'll get somebody else. Like it's that simple. Yeah. Comply or goodbye. Like you can't have different sets of rules on the job site. So they need to hear that pretty early on, and we don't have a whole lot of sympathy that just because they're a sub, they don't have to play by the same rules. It doesn't apply.
To put it in football terms, we're all operating with the same playbook.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Davis, to add to Brian's comment, the comply and or goodbye is, and not only within your organization or the subs or the subs, but anybody that visits the work site. Let's just for use an example, if Colin came to visit our site, now I know there'd be no question about it because it's a culture for him, but there is people that will come to a site, whether it's for a government agency or something, they have to follow the exact same rules that all of our do. Because what you've done then, if they don't, is you've watered down the level of safety with your other people. And trust me, they notice if you're giving somebody an exemption.
Outstanding. Gentlemen, I want to go back to the mental health comments that were made. This next question is, how do you stress the importance of mental health and wellness to old school supervisors and get their buy-in? Old guys like myself, where you can't teach an old dog new trick. We operate with the playbook that we have from 1960, and my goodness, it worked then, it'll work now. How do we get compliance and adaptation from these people?
I think you've
Wayne?
got to get them to hear the stories of people who've suffered, and they're out there. I was at a Ride Don't Hide program that raises money for mental health, and they had a speaker there who was someone of my vintage talking about their struggle with mental health, and it just hits you right in the heart. And if you can get these people that are not respecting it to actually talk to someone who's gone through it, to realize that it is there. So it's education. And I think that's an important part of what to do. It's a tough one to do though, because you've taught these people in the past to just keep going forward. And now all of a sudden you want them to step back and understand, but it's important that they do understand. So I think that's one way I've done it in the past.
Excellent. Brian?
Yeah, care, understanding, empathy, all of those things which sometimes are foreign to the people who haven't lived it or witnessed it. But you need to emphasize it. It's real. It's there. It's every day. So we need to make sure we shape our workplaces to provide that kind of support and reduce the threat to poor mental health. Make them welcoming places. Make them understanding places. Yeah, easy to say, hard to do.
Just to add to that though, is getting your organization involved in campaigns, Bell Let's Talk, those kind of things. But if you do something within your organization, you're bringing awareness to the ones who may not have been as aware as before. So there's lots of opportunity to do that now.
Yeah, more than ever before, Wayne.
Yeah, I would echo that. I mean, everywhere, everyone has been affected by mental health in some way, shape, or form. We've had it impact our lives in some way, shape, or form. It's not something that we hide in the closet anymore. And I think companies have been doing a tremendous job of putting it out there and educating and providing avenues for support. And it's not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of living. That's the best part about the education that we're receiving. We're saying that it affects all of us. Therefore, we need to be proactive and we need to be sensitive to the situation because it is a health situation. Excellent question. Want to get back to another question. Is there anything you haven't been asked that you would like to talk about right now? I know that there's a lot of things that we've touched on throughout this conversation, but I want to give you an opportunity to be able to say something that you haven't gotten an opportunity to say. Wayne, I'll start with you.
Yeah, there's one big one. We've talked so much about culture. We've talked a lot about connectivity. There's a third C that we've kind of lived by, and it's common sense. I think that has to be brought into safety also. You have to use common sense when it comes to making a decision about some of these things. And we sometimes let that disappear on it. We try to let the book control us, or we try to let the policy control us, but you have to use your own common sense in a lot of cases. It might tell you that this is the wrong way to do it, but maybe it's not. And you got to step back and take a look at it, get a second opinion if they have to. But I think common sense is critical when it comes to safety.
Yeah, it's something that we sometimes take for granted that people are going to employ. Is common sense and practicality. Mr. Barber.
I just have one additional thought, Davis, and to expand on something that Wayne said earlier. It shouldn't be just about construction safety. It should be about life safety. It goes beyond the workplace. It goes to your everyday life. Everything you do should have a focus on safety, so that you're not cutting the grass in your flip flops. Not, you wear PPE at work on the job every day, and then on the weekend you're out at the cottage on the top of your stepladder cutting off limbs with a chainsaw. I mean, it's a disconnect. So we need to emphasize that workplace safety doesn't stop when you leave the workplace. It should be in the forefront of your mind, everything you do. So it's broader than just construction safety or workplace safety. It's safety generally. It's life safety. It's being wise and intelligent about everything you do. When the work the plan.
Yes. Colin, I apologize. I wanted to ask you a similar question, our Toronto expert.
Well, mainly I need to echo both of what Wayne and Brian said. There are things in legislation that and they're referred to as reasonably practicable, and being reasonable is a very important part of understanding a hazard and how to respond to a hazard. And so I'm not giving a technical response here. It's much more of a how do I solve a problem response. In some cases I may need to put up a 20-foot concrete barrier, but a flag that tells me that there's an edge here might also do in a circumstance. And so sometimes there's a tendency to over-engineer. I know you have a German car, Candace, and I know with some of those vehicles there's a tendency to over-engineer when something more basic will not only be can only be effective, but probably be more efficient and actually give you a better outcome. Or at least you're in the shop a little bit less than others, and and that points to the herd of Razor's Occam, which is typically the simplest the simplest solution is often the best. And if we have the ability to simplify things, and it makes it a lot easier for people to look, particularly in the small to medium-sized enterprises, to look at a problem and go, okay, I don't need a $300,000 response to deal with a $50 problem. There may be other ways to look at it, but to do that, you need advice, you need some education, you need some help. I realize it's a bit of an ad campaign, but we've got people on our team here that can help provide some ideas. There are resources online and other tools that are available to help you figure out how can you solve some problems in a way that doesn't necessarily have to cost you a fortune. And as you learn, you get better at executing these things. And then over time, it's just the way that you do business. And so, I think I think those are the elements, and I think it kind of incorporates what Wayne said and what Brian said in terms of practicality, in terms of not overthinking things. Sometimes there's a tendency to do that, and that's not always necessary. And I encourage people to consider a wide range of options before they just respond to something that they see without properly analyzing it.
Yeah, excellent points, gentlemen. Colin, I have to say that you're going to get me kicked out of Canada and the U.S. So I'm going to be a man without a country. Gentlemen, you've touched on a lot of very important points here. The audience have asked a lot of very important and critical questions. I want to ask you both, what advice would you, given your decades of experience, your vast knowledge of the industry, what advice would you give leaders in construction? What advice, one bit of advice that you would give them moving forward as we continue to advance safety as a part of the culture in construction? Brian?
Interesting question. one piece of advice, enjoy the ride. Take it all in, be the best you can be. Embrace the industry. If you're in a place that you like, in an industry that you like, enjoy it, work it. And a safety piece, I think that becomes very personal, particularly if you've lost loved ones through an unfortunate accident. It doesn't need reinforcing. It's just a way of life. Be safe, be wise, and give back. Give back to your industry. Give back to your to your society, and live a good life. Kind of motherhood and apple pie statement, but that's what I think. And as you get older, you get a little bit more philosophical about that stuff, Kavis. But yeah, that's what I think.
I'm in that realm of philosophy. Don't feel that you don't have company. Wayne.
Well, listening to my my more distinguished colleague, he's probably the first panel he's ever been on that he's had the most hair, which is kind of interesting. But Brian has certainly hit two subjects that are very dear to me about enjoy it. Pride. Be very proud of the industry. For many years, we taught our kids to go to university. Again, nothing wrong with that. But there is a lot of pride in the construction industry, and I don't think we brag about it enough, or we don't share that with the youth. That's the first thing. But I think Brian hit on my number one, and I've got several years. I got a coat rack behind me with about 50 lanyards on it from all the years of being in volunteerism and all the banquets I went to. But I tell you, the education and my contact file today is my greatest asset that I have, because of the people I've met through this industry by being involved in industry associations and doing things such as this today. So number one, be proud of it. And number two is be connected and get involved.
Yeah. I have to say that, bald is in vogue.
You can always join the club, Brian.
It's okay. It's okay to embrace it. But you gentlemen have touched on some very important points I want to emphasize. Being reflective and being prideful. There's nothing more rewarding than, once it's all done, being able to sit back and with pride say, I've done it the right way. I did it the right way. And this is what is produced. And it's a legacy that you have continued to propagate. So I really appreciate the advice and the time that you, Brian, you, Wayne, have spent with the audience today. The great information that you've shared, your experiences, your heart, your passion for the industry and for the art of safety. I want to thank the audience for the tremendous questions that they ask, and for everything that the Construction Safety Association in Saskatchewan, Colin, you and your team do. You've done a wonderful job over the years. You continue to look at being innovative and how you can be supportive. You have a fantastic team, as illustrated here today, and want to personally thank you for the efforts that your organization continues to do and the leadership you've shown in this very important and critical topic. I'm going to turn it back over to Kelly. And once again, thank you all for letting me be a part of this morning. And hopefully you have a continually good and safe Wednesday.
Kavis, I want to thank you for a great job of facilitating. You did a wonderful job.
Likewise. Awesome. Good job, Kavis. And thank you.
Thank you, Kavis. Thanks, Wayne. Thanks, Brian.